Well, good afternoon or good morning, I guess, for us here in Houston. And I guess for you folks up in New York, it's afternoon. Welcome to Mission Control Houston. You're looking at the International Space Station Flight Control Room. And we are very pleased to have with us here Jason Barber. He is a aerospace engineer, so he's very smart. He works right in front here on one of the other consoles. He's supports the environmental control and life support system on the station, monitors all of that activity as part of the environmental and thermal operating system of the station. So Jason's agreed to join us and help answer some questions for you guys. So we're really happy to have you guys here.
Good morning. It's good to talk to people from my home state.
Welcome.
Okay, welcome. We understand you're a New Yorker. I went to school in Binghamton on Route 81.
Okay.
So Southern Tier. And we have a couple of students with questions. We learned this year, because of our work, that 2 of the family members worked with NASA. The things you learn when you work with you people. So we have we'll have one of those students tell you what Grandpa did. And we have lovely questions. Tell us when you'd like us to ask our questions.
We're ready. We're really happy to have you guys here. We're going to try.
Thank you. Julia?
My name is Julia. My questions are mostly about the Gemini missions because my grandpa, Richard Snoraski, was a real-time programmer for IBM that reported to NASA from 1962 to 1966. So I was wondering what kind of information you got from the spacecraft's radar during the Gemini missions.
That helped you with these current missions.
Right.
I'll answer that as best I can, but the main thing was how the vehicle worked in space, orbiting the planet, how the life support equipment was interfacing with the crew, and taking that and expanding it to making it to Mars, making it all the way to the moon and back, and basically making sure all of that hardware worked the way it was supposed to for long durations. The other thing it figured out was doing attitude maneuvers while the vehicle was in space and being able to align the vehicle to leave Earth's atmosphere and go to the moon itself. So it was testing all of that, those capabilities, so that way we could land on the moon in Apollo like we did.
So I guess that Julia can be a legacy and maybe one day work right here where her grandpa did. That'll be pretty exciting.
And that's not unheard of. We've actually, in the flight director office, we've had father-son flight directors before, so it is not unheard of for families to follow each other into NASA.
You go.
What's your computer?
In fact, we encourage it.
Who's my number 1? Ryan?
Hello, my name is Ryan, and my question is, what do members of Mission Control do to prepare for launch, and the most recent one with Expedition 36? Thank you.
You may have to repeat that. Can you get a...
What did you do to prepare for... What did Mission Control have to do to prepare for this launch, this most recent mission when it was going up? What was your role in it?
My particular role in that? Well, my console's role was to basically determine that we had all the consumables that we needed to be able to support the crew while they're on orbit. And by that, that we have plenty of water, plenty of food. We have the necessary equipment to be able to process their bathroom facilities into drinking water the next day. And basically making sure all of that is ready for them to get there.
Nimi, this is Patricia. If the students could come closer to the microphone, that way we could hear them better, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, number 3?
Number 2.
Number 2, I'm sorry. Quickly. Come up. And number 3, line up behind her. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and my question is, how and where are new members of the Mission Control taught?
You may have to help us with that, Nemi.
Yeah, say that again.
How and where new members of Mission Control taught?
Where are you trained? Where is your best way for training in order to become assigned to Mission Control?
Okay. I'll just give a general overview of my path. The first thing is get your four-year engineering degree, and that can be aerospace, mechanical, or any one of that type. And then once you get done with that, you get hired by NASA, and you'll go through a series of training. My training took me about 2.5 years to get the current cert I have to work on life support. And basically, NASA teaches you to become a flight controller, and that's through a series of simulations, book reading, testing, to take on the job that I have. And then after that, once I do a year or so of working console, that's when I get assigned to be a mission lead for various missions. Like for me, it was shuttle missions and increment leads with the crew that's on orbit now, and various other system leads that pop up for different hardwares and stuff that launch. So that's the general path to the training.
And that's essentially the path that a lot of the people you see in this room take. As Jason said, there's different engineering backgrounds, and depending on what position you're sitting at in this room, you oversee a specific area of that space station to make sure that it's safe and operating for the crew that's on board.
Correct.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Allie, and my question is, what have been some of the most important measures you normally take to ensure safety? Is there anything new you are doing to improve safety awareness on the ISS?
Well, 3 of the items that my console is specifically involved in is emergencies. So any one of those emergencies can be a rapid depress, a hole in the shell of the vehicle, a fire on board the vehicle, or some sort of toxic fluid gets spilled on ISS. And my console is constantly revamping procedures and making improvements, so that way if any of those emergencies were to occur, we could respond as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
My name is Pamela, and my question is, what type of technology is most commonly used that we would understand from mission control?
Well, probably computers. Everything that we do is all on computers. All of our telemetry that we get from the vehicle we view on computers. And all of that is processed on the ground and then sent to our particular consoles where our computers are at, and we can view all the telemetry that we have.
Yeah, there's my producer Karen showing Jason's console right there, so you guys can see that's where he normally sits if he's on duty. Of course, he's helping me today talk to you guys, but that is a live view just about 15 or 20 feet away. And the back side of that console, what you don't see, is all of their computer screens that stream the data that Jason's talking to you about, so they can maintain a real good watch over all of the things that are going on with their systems aboard the International Space Station.
In fact, if you look behind us, we have computers right here that are similar to what all the other consoles have, so that way you can get an idea of what it is we're looking at.
Right.
Most consoles have about 5 monitors that we're using to look at our data.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ariel, and this is my question. What have you learned about the spider's web in space? How is it different on Earth?
He's interested in the creatures that you have and what you've learned from them.
Thank you.
I'll answer that the best I can.
That's a toughie.
And I'm going to answer it just based on my views from the video that we got downlinked. It looked like the spider webs were more perfectly formed. So where they didn't have gravity pulling them down, it looked like a more pure shape. As far as the exact details of what we learned from that, I can get more information for you and pass it on to you guys if you'd like. As off the top of my head, I don't know.
Ever come back alive?
Yeah, I think that some of them did. For the most part, that they did. We have one method right now. You know, we had the space shuttle program that was able to bring cargo down from the station, and now we have other partners that are providing cargo capability. One of which can provide a return capability. So, so yes, when we do have insect or animal type experiments on the station, they are able to be brought back home.
Christy?
My name is Christy, and my question is, how many flight controllers have become flight directors?
I tried to get an answer to that question, and
Most flight directors are flight controllers from one discipline or another. Generally, that's the path you take if you want to be a flight director, is you become a flight controller. There's a few exceptions here and there, but I'd say probably 95% of the flight directors were flight controllers.
yeah, I think almost every one of them worked their way through, just like Jason's doing, you know, training to be a specialist in one specific area. The flight director obviously is the person that oversees everything that goes on that shift. As you know, a flight director is in this room 24 hours a day, around the clock, on 3 shifts, and so so we have flight directors that have to know everything about all of the systems on the station, but they do rely heavily on Jason and the rest of the flight controllers to provide the very quickly information to him to help make decisions, especially in the case where there may be a problem that you have to work. So flight director is a critical position in the room, and as Jason said, that almost all of them have come from the background that Jason has in flight control. Good question.
My name is Emily, and my question is, what other experiments with animals, insects, or other creatures do you have planned? Fish, more spider experiments, more bees, and what are some of the changes that have occurred to them when they return?
I'm not sure. I can find out for you if you'd like. And actually, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to find out for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've had all different types of some insects and we've had the fish experiments on board as well. We have investigators on the ground that plan those experiments. The crew checks on those types of living animal or insect experiments throughout the flight, and then when they're brought back, the investigators look at those to see what changes occurred. We don't hear the direct feedback from those, you know, here in the room, but you know, learning about animals and insects it sounds strange, but it will help in the long term when we try to send humans further out into space as well, because anything that happens to insects over short periods of times or small animals could happen to human beings, and so we need to learn all of that before we send humans further than the altitude that the space station's at right now, which is, you know, about only 250 miles away from us. But if we go further out into space, obviously we need to be able to protect a crew for those long periods of time.
And to give you an example of an experiment that will have direct impact to people on the ground, it's not necessarily using insects, but it's a lung experiment that'll be launching the next year or so, and that'll give us more insight on asthma and help us to be able to come up with better treatments for people with asthma. So that'll be launching in the next year.
Hi, my name is Brendan, and my question is, what does Mission Control have to do when there's a problem to be solved, such as the ammonia leak on the International Space Station?
Great question.
Well, actually, it was Mission Control that found the leak in the first place through monitoring our data. And basically, once we observed that we had the leak, we, at that stage, pulled the team together and figured out, okay, is this something we can solve from commanding on the ground? Are we going to have to send the crew out EVA, which is what we ended up doing. So once we made that decision to go EVA, the ground here in Mission Control figured out, okay, what do we need to do during this EVA? Do we replace the pump? Do we do tests along the way? Or what do we need to do? So it was the team here working together to figure out how to solve that problem.
I think that's a perfect example of teamwork, because, you know, mission control is critical to what happens on the space station in terms of seeing all the data and being able to, tell the crew what's going on, and not only tell the crew what's going on, but have the crew help if there is a troubleshooting procedure like what we ended up having to do with what you just mentioned. With that ammonia leak, we ended up sending a crew out to track it down and actually fix it physically. And we obviously couldn't do that from here, but it was a great example of teamwork and teamwork that occurred over a very short period of time to make that happen and keep the vehicle and the crew safe. Great question.
Another example of the team working together, we had this is about 3 years ago now, but our CO2 removal device, it suffered a software failure. The hardware itself was fine, but the software wasn't working properly. So we ended up having to do manual commanding from the ground to basically manipulate it to do everything it needed to do that software would normally do for us. So the ground, basically, that's an example of the ground doing for the crew what the crew didn't have to do. So we did all the commanding and everything from the ground to make that happen.
Wow, that's really something. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Akshay, and this is my question. What is the algorithm for solving an issue on the International Space Station? Do you have a specific procedure, and who's in charge? Thank you.
I didn't quite get all that question.
Akshay, you may have to repeat that.
Okay. Go ahead. What is the algorithm for solving an issue on the International Space Station? Do you have a specific procedure, and who's in charge?
Ultimately, the flight director is in charge for approving our troubleshooting methods. But typically, what happens is, say, like with the Cedra example, or excuse me, the CO2 example that I used earlier. When the failure occurs, my team was looking at, okay, how do we keep CO2 removal going and not impact the mission? So we sat down, figured out, okay, how do we make this work? Once we had the plan, we presented that to the flight director, and they said, yep, sounds good. Go ahead and do what you need to do. We documented that in a procedure. Flight approved it, and then we started implementing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Hello, my name is Daniel, and my question is, can you communicate with the ISS directly, or do you have to use a satellite to connect your communications? And what type of signal do you use? Example, a cell phone signal, a radio, or what's your primary type of signal? Thank you.
We do have to use satellites to talk to the space station. There is no direct line of sight communication. We use two types of signals to talk to the space station. One is called S-band, which is similar to what you would think of as a cell phone, which gives us our telemetry that we look at for all of our troubleshooting, our day-to-day monitoring, and our voice communication with the crew. The second set is KU band, which think of that like the internet. That's what gives us all of our payload information that we get and all of our video that we see coming from space.
So just to add to that, the communications that we get from the station, they have a big dish on the station, just like a satellite dish, and that can communicate directly with communication satellites, and then that transmission is bounced to the ground and bounced here to mission control. So we can stay in pretty constant contact with the crew. We have short periods of time here and there where we lose the signal, right? And
yes.
But for the most part, we can stay in pretty close contact with them. Now, way back in the Gemini days, we were talking about Gemini earlier, that we didn't have the communication satellite capability, so we did have ground stations, and the spacecraft could talk directly to the ground, but only during short periods of time.
Yes.
So the ability to talk to the space station has changed so dramatically over the last 40, 50 years. And that allows us, and not only do we can communicate on one channel, but we actually have 4 different voice channels now.
Right.
So the crews can actually be talking on different channels about different experiments, just like we would on the ground in offices to get work done. That's a great question.
Thank you.
I'm Nicole, and we were watching the launch replay of the Soyuz spacecraft, and I'm wondering why were there stuffed animals hanging from the interior?
Well, it gave us something entertaining to watch, didn't it? That varies from crew to crew. Some crew like having stuffed animals to play with on orbit. And it gave you a pretty good view of, okay, how much rocking is the Soyuz going through as it's on its way up. But generally, the stuffed animals, that's a crew preference item.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a scientific approach, like Jason says. It shows the crew when they actually, they can obviously feel the gravity building up on them, or the G-forces, excuse me, building up on them as they climb into space. Once they get into space and the engines shut down, it's instant. And now you see a view inside the vehicle for the launch the other day. But it actually, when that engine shuts off, it's instant microgravity, or 0G, and the commander of the Soyuz spacecraft that you saw there, his children actually picked the small toy that and each crew member each flight is different, but that's what that's all about, and it's obviously a sentimental item, but it's also has a scientific purpose as well.
Hey, Amara?
Hi, I'm Amara, and my question is, what new materials or information does the new crew on the ISS hope to bring back to Earth?
The main thing is basically the crew themselves, the experiments on them, as we determine how is space affecting them. So that helps us determine more data for when we go to Moon and Mars. How is long-term exposure to space going to affect them?
My name is Jime, and my question is, what is a favorite mission that you're working on in Mission Control?
You have a favorite?
What was my favorite mission?
Yes.
Oh, there's been so many. I'd have to say my favorite mission was when I did the Columbus mission, when I was the lead for that, when we launched the Columbus module. It was fun working with the international partners and attaching a brand new module to the space station. So I have to say that probably holds a special place in my heart.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Hammond, and my dad was Tyler Hammond, and he worked in the Canadian Space Agency on a satellite. And I'm wondering, what was the second most important contribution to the ISS other than the Canadarm?
Notice Canadarm became #1 from a Canadian point of view.
well, obviously, and it is a very important component of the International Space Station for sure. Jason's going to say Columbus again because he worked the shuttle flight that delivered the European laboratory, right? But
well, Canada holds a special place in my heart since I grew up on the border. But I'd say the Canadian crew probably is the next best thing to the arm. And that the Canadian crew that goes up there, like Chris Hatfield that was just there, he did a lot of good interaction with a lot of children on the ground and bringing them more closer to the experience of space.
Last one, I think. We have time.
Do the different mission controls connect to each other? And if they do, how do they do that?
Did you say the mission controls for all around the world?
Different sensors. Yes.
We all are connected to each other, and that's through basically through the internet. That we have interfaces so that way we can talk to each other, share telemetry, share experimental information, but all of that is all connected through the internet.
Well, that was a great bunch of questions. If we had time, we'd sit here with you guys all day, but y'all have schoolwork probably to get back to, and Jason's got to get back to work as well. But we really enjoyed y'all coming inside Mission Control with us and talking with us today, and we loved all the questions. We really appreciate it.
Do I have time to say?
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing I wanted to say to you guys is, if you can dream it, you can do it. Don't let yourself be put into a box of what you can and can't do. Follow your dreams. Work hard. Get that education. And just follow your hearts. And you'll do anything that you want to do.
Great advice. You guys have a great day, and we really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate the inspirational and the answers and all the work that you took time out of your day and left your seat empty on Mission Control so that you could be with us. We thank you for that.
Well, I'm happy to be here. It was very fun talking to you guys.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Have a good day.
Thank you.